Good evening. This is Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the regular meeting of the Select Board for November 24th, 2020. This meeting, like all of our meetings during this COVID emergency, is being held using the Zoom platform as a remote meeting. All of our members and a quorum is meeting remotely. This meeting will also be recorded, which will be a public record. So if you have a concern with being anonymous, you can turn off the video. And I think there are ways for you to change the name on the screen. So with that, with those announcements, let's start the meeting, starting with announcements, updates, or comments from the Select Board. Are there any from the Select Board?
I can go, if that's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
All right. Hey, folks, this is it. This is go time. We've been talking a lot about supporting our small businesses in Brookline, our locally owned businesses in Brookline. Here we are. Another holiday season is upon us, and a real opportunity as you think about things like gift giving and taking out and grabbing food for the family and things like that to consider businesses. This coming Saturday, November 29th, is Small Business Saturday. Of course, every day is Small Business Day around here, but if you'd really like to get out there and support our small businesses, Saturday would be a great day to do it. Also, many of you are familiar with the First Light Festival. While we're not going to be having an in-person sort of one-day First Light Festival, we are, over the course of a week, going to be having a virtual First Light Festival. And if you want more information on that, encourage you to go to firstlight.brooklinechamber.com and learn about all the ways that businesses are engaging with the community and some opportunities for you to engage with them. A few more things very quickly. There's a hashtag you can use if you'd like to share photos online, which is hashtag #LoveBrooklineRestaurants. Good opportunity to share what you've picked up or took out or eating in with meals with family. Those kinds of things. So hashtag #LoveBrooklineRestaurants. By the way, we if you can pick up your food, understand that delivery is the only option for some of us, but picking up our meals actually helps our small businesses. The delivery fees from these third-party vendors actually can really eat up profits for our local restaurants. They can be up to 30% of the total bill. So if you are able to go to the local restaurant and pick up your food, that's actually more desirable. So all those things and a whole lot more. This is a critical time for businesses in Brookline, as we've talked about before here at the Select Board. There's so much that we can do from our positions on this board. There's a lot that we can do within the community to support the businesses that we want to see make it through the winter. So please do what you can, when you can, with what you got. Thank you.
By the way, I read in the paper somewhere about a initiative of Senator Crean, and it's designed to address food insecurity and simultaneously help struggling restaurants in Newton, Brookline, and Wellesley. And she was able to get a $175,000 budget allocation for this program. I hope I assume someone in Brookline is following up on that and taking advantage of those funds. It's being coordinated by the Chambers of Commerce, but there may be some opportunity for, Brookline Community Foundation or even the town to support what is really a 2-for-1 bargain, helping the restaurants who are really, really hurting, as well as providing food to people who need it. So,
indeed, thank you.
Any other announcements, updates, or comments? Okay, let's move on. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I just want to mention something on behalf of the Transportation Board, and that is that they are going to be having a significant public hearing coming up, and other board members are going to have to help me. Is it December 1st or November 30th? One of those two. But you can check it out by checking out the website of the Transportation Board on the Brookline town page. This has to do with Gateway East, which those of you who on a regular basis live in or pass through the area of Brookline Village near the fire station, that's pretty much the area that is known to the transportation planners and other planners as Gateway East. And there's going to be significant proposals for changes to the transportation plan within that area. And it's one of those occasions when we really need to hear from all interested parties and all stakeholders, because the changes are significant. And the last thing we want is for people to say after the fact, I didn't even know these things were being contemplated. So do check out the Transportation Board part of the Brookline Town website. Look for the information about the upcoming discussion by the Transportation Board of the Gateway East proposals. And if you think you have something to say about them, make sure that your voice is heard.
Yeah, this is going to be a major project. You know, one of the things it involves is bus lanes that, I mean, I don't know the details, but my guess is a bus lane in that area is going to affect big time the bicyclists, pedestrians, and of course, vehicle traffic in an area that is already a chokehold for transportation in Brookline. So I hope people really monitor this and put in their 2 cents so that you know the planners for this project know, you know, the concerns of the community.
I wanted to.
Let me just add, John. I
Yeah.
just looked up on the town calendar.
Yeah.
The 30th is town meeting.
Right. December 1st is the date for the first meeting, and then December 7th for the second.
Okay.
Yeah,
Second meeting's a transportation board meeting.
Correct. Right. First one is a community meeting at December 1st, 6 p.m. Second one is a transportation board meeting December 7th at 6:30 p.m.
Okay. When I jumped to transportation board meetings, it only tells me about the 16th, but it may be that these were added recently. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, any other updates, announcements, or comments? None? Okay, let's move on. Public comment. Ms. Fields, is there anyone in the queue wishing to make a public comment? Right.
Yes, at this time we have 2 people signed up for public comment. The first one is Stephen Krug. Stephen, you've been promoted to a panelist and can unmute and share your video when you're comfortable. You will have 3 minutes.
Unmute, start video. Hello. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how that background got behind there. I haven't used Zoom for a while, but we'll just ignore it because I've only got 3 minutes. So my name's Steve Krug. I live at 237 Russet Road, the last house before VFW Parkway. And I'm asking for the board's help on behalf of my neighbors who are abutters and near abutters to the residences at Chestnut Hill, the CHR 40B project, the one south of Independence. Especially the people who live on the side of Russet that abuts Hancock Village. I'm speaking in support of a letter that was sent to the select board asking for your help in reducing the construction hours, which have recently expanded from 8 a.m. on weekdays to 7 a.m. on weekdays and added Saturday work days. In addition to the 4-story complex that's being built, there's a new construction of townhouses that have astonishingly small setback from the abutters' properties. They're right in their backyards. Since March 1st, 2 weeks before the lockdown, blasting has been occurring twice a day. I don't know if you've ever been around blasting, but even though you get text messages saying when the blasting is going to be during the day, there's sort of no way to prepare yourself for the shock. So we were told that this blasting would last, as I recall, about 3 months. It's been 9 months now. And these people, these families and their children have been trapped inside for months because quarantine started 2 weeks after the blasting did. I think we all expected that the blasting would be the worst part because we knew it was coming. But I went over a couple months after it started. I went over to the property line, the backyard of one of the abutters, to see what was going on, and I was astonished to find that the blasting was far from the worst part. The worst part was the nonstop, all-day backup sounds of these huge trucks that were hauling out the 20,000 tons of rubble. So it really was one of the most annoying things I've ever heard. I can't understand how these people have been able to live with it, particularly staying home and trying to work and trying to help their kids get to schooling. There are many other things, diesel fumes and whatnot, and they've recently started construction apart from the blasting, and so they're construction on these townhouses, which are right on the borderline of their property. So basically, these people have 25-foot backyards, and these townhouses are being built less than 25 feet from their backyard property line. So I just wanted to come on. I know other people are going to come on and speak, but I'm fortunate enough to be across the street, so I actually don't get the backup noises all the time. I hear them sometimes, and I hear the construction
You have 30
noises.
seconds.
Okay. So that's about it. I had images I was going to show, basically showing you how close this construction is to the property line. It's kind of amazing. But I'll leave it to other people to contribute what they have to say. And I appreciate any help you can give these poor people. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. King. Krug.
The next person signed up for public comment is Elisa Jonas.
Hello, it's Elisa Jonas. I live at 333 Russet Road, and I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 16. And I'm pretty much following up with what Steve Krug had to say. You've all, I assume, read the letter with the request to reduce the hours to more of what it was at least this summer and not expanded hours, because it is unrelenting for the people who, I, like Steve, live on the other side of Russet Road, but it is an unrelenting noise for those people who live next to it. And I don't know how many of you have actually taken a walk to that site. It is a dystopia. And I think, Devin, can I share my screen? I think I can. Yes. Hold on. So I don't know how many of you have seen this. This used to be there was a green belt, and this is all pudding stone. This has been blasted out. It looks like a scene from Brazil, the movie Brazil. We all have heard the blasting day after day after day. It has shaken our houses every day. It doesn't last for a long time, but it was still distressing every time a blast would happen, and this is still ongoing. But today I just thought, in preparation for this meeting, I would take a little walk and just get some of the noise that people are dealing with. So this was just 2 hours ago. That's one location. And here's another location, which I think can tell you, show you a little bit better how close this is to the neighboring houses. Let's see. I also
30 seconds.
Sorry, and I also just got a note from a neighbor. Today I was awakened at 4:30 by a bad dream. So then at 7, I was trying to get back to bed as I have to work till nighttime today. But then the trucks were coming and the nailing was happening at the VFW building and the stuff by Asheville. No way I could take a 20-minute nap. The adverse effect on all our lives, 6 days a week, is almost like torture, causing me high blood pressure and anxiety. We live in a huge, ongoing, years-long construction site, and we cannot escape it by going home. So we are just asking for this huge construction site, which I urge you all to go take a look at if you haven't seen it, directly abutting these homes, to request that Chestnut Hill Realty limit the hours to at least 8 to 5 during the
You've
week.
reached 3 minutes.
And that's it.
Finish up. Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else in the queue, Ms. Field?
Yes, it looks like we have one person who's raising their hand. You have been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video when you're ready, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hello?
Hi there.
Hi.
Oh, hi. You know, I
Hey,
was,
Mr. Schlesing, are you going to speak about the Arts Commission?
well, I wanted to make, why is this?
I'm sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to make one comment about that last,
Okay.
Ms. Jonas, that the town already has noise pollution bylaws that deal with any noise within 400 feet of residential areas. And those bylaws were passed in the 1980s. So you might want to check into that in dealing with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I am here on the other item though.
Okay, you'll have a time at that point. Or you have your chance at that point.
All right, at this time, there are 13 attendees and no one else has used the Q&A or hand raise feature to indicate they'd like to make a public comment.
Okay, let's start off with miscellaneous items. Approval of the meeting minutes from Thursday, November 19. Any edits or comments from the select board? No? I move approval of the minutes from Thursday, November 19 of the select board. All in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Vanskoyak.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Now, Commission for the Arts requests. I take it Z. Schlesing is still around. Question of approving changes submitted by the Brookline Commission for the Arts to the designation of the Poet Laureate program, changing it to Literary Laureate program, and to broaden the scope of the program and diversity of applicants. So who's gonna make a presentation on this?
I could start.
Austin? Yeah.
I could start. My name
Okay.
is Daniel Gostin. I'm the chair of the Arts Commission. Hope you're all well this week. So the Arts Commission, the Brookline Commission for the Arts has been talking about how to go forward with the Poet Laureate program, specifically how to fund it. For the past couple of years, I've been on the commission for 4 years, and in each year that we've every year when we've tried to talk about our funding, we've had to use our own funds to cover the set fee that is in the program description. So funding is a major issue for us, but we've been talking about this since September 2019, about possibly changing the parameters of the genres involved in this program. So instead of just focusing on a poet laureate, we voted in February, our February meeting this year, to change the title of the program from Poet Laureate to Literary Laureate, which would include, from our proposed change, this new program that broadens the search for exceptional talent in all areas of literary arts, including but not limited to poetry, spoken word poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and playwriting. So there are two reasons for this proposed change. One is practical. In the past two searches, we've only received about 2 to 3 applicants. We've had searches in the past 2 searches in the past 4 or 5 years in which we received limited number of applicants. The biggest practical issue is funding. The only outside funding we've had for the past few years is from Brookline Brooksmith. And of course, after the pandemic of this year, we are hesitant to, or don't expect them to be able to contribute to this any longer. So we figured that broadening the position could open new sources of funding and sponsorship. The second reason is artistic and educational. It's not an entirely novel idea. I know we've received pushback just because there's poet laureates of most states, and of course the Library of Congress appoints a national poet laureate. However, there are a growing number of municipalities in the country that have literary laureates. There's a regional Southern California conglomerate called Inlandia. They have a literary laureate. The city of Laguna Beach, California. Actually, the state of Alaska has a writer laureate as opposed to just a poet laureate. And closer to home, the city of Dover, New Hampshire also has a literary laureate, which they changed last year, actually. The other educational reason is we're trying to engage more artists in Brookline to give authors more opportunities, more unique opportunities that they may not have otherwise in the public sphere. And we're also trying to reach out to more youth and school programs. A general literary laureate has the potential to take on literacy programs and engage younger audiences with creative writing, not limited to the poetic genre. There's kind of a side effect of us asking the select board for this change. Because we actually do want to kind of have a dialogue with you about what the parameters might be. So if you have any suggestions on this program, since it did originate from a select board idea, we're happy to take those in advisement, and also to talk about funding, because it is a little bit of an unfunded mandate that the BCA administers this program and has to kind of fund it itself, even though it is stipulated in the approved program that we do fund this position. So that's what I have to say. And I think our BCA member, Amy Emmert, has something.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the Select Board for listening to us this evening. My name's Amy Emmert. I'm at 1141 Beacon Street. I am a Select Board member. I'm sorry, I'm not a Select Board, I'm the Arts Commissioner. I am the treasurer on the board for Brookline Interactive Group, a board member of Arts Brookline, and I'm working on the Cultural District project for the Brookline Village. And Dan really did a great job outlining our goals. The vote to move to a literary laureate program from poet laureate was unanimous among the commission members. And we were hoping to make the program appealing to both traditional and innovative literary forms to engage and engage Brookline residents. We hope to promote the program as broadly inclusive of literary topics and to help engage residents in storytelling in novel ways. We anticipate we might be able to raise funds, as Dan said, for this program with a bigger scope of literary pursuits. And it's become increasingly difficult to raise funds, but there are opportunities out there to raise funds if we had a greater reach and were more interested in more inclusive writers and literary artists. So we would like to just make sure that we are engaging a greater scope and group in our public, among our residents to participate in this and not feel a little bit, frankly, intimidated by the concept of a poet laureate as a very very traditional, but it's also has some connotations about it that make it very structured in an older kind of position in the public realm. So that's all I really need to say. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sussling is, would you like to say something? I believe you signed up.
I'm promoting him now.
Okay, I unmuted.
You're unmuted now.
It says unmuted. Alternate control A.
You're all set.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We
Yep.
can.
Okay, so first of all, as I said in the letter that I attached to you folks yesterday, the town of Brookline already has the ability to do that. The BCA does is they celebrate, promote awareness and appreciation for the literary arts. And I can tell you, not only do I write poetry, I write fiction as well. And when I was going around in the town doing these things in the high school and in some of the elementary schools, I did talk about fiction, short fiction, and poetry. And any person who is appointed to this can do the same. I think that the commission does not advertise enough for the position to get more positions. And in terms of diversity, I suggested two people. Deborah Leipziger, who is Brazilian born, American, female, Jewish, and she is world renowned in a number of fields dealing with sustainability and other forms of nonfiction writing. I also suggested Tino Villanueva, who is Hispanic. He's originally from Texas, southern Texas, near the Mexican border. Both of them are bilingual. She speaks Portuguese and English, and he speaks Spanish and English. And he is world renowned. He received an award from Spain last year or the year before. And they are both very talented people. There are a lot of poets in the town of Brookline that if the commission took the time to seek them out through various forms of media, they could probably get a much larger number of people submitting than 2 or 3 that they stated. By the way, I did ask them to notify me when they were having this meeting, and they didn't bother to notify me at all. Fortunately, one of the selectmen did, and I'm very grateful to that person. But overall, in terms of funding, if they want to seek funding, they can seek funding, but it can be an honorary position that's non-paid, as it is in a number of communities. I spent many years trying to get this passed and appear in the town, and it sort of hurts me to see that after I've been the poet laureate, now they want to change it through no fault of mine, but I believe through their own fault of not really seeking out people. The funding can either be done through the town or not done at all. They get money from the Mass Commission on the Arts, and they can take money from that and do it. It just seems that they will have money for everything else except this, according to them. So that's really what I have to say. But if you read the town Brookline Poet Laureate mandate, it says the town of Brookline Poet Laureate program seeks to celebrate poetry and promote awareness and appreciation for the literary arts. So why they need to change this, I do not know. I don't think that what they have stated is a sufficient reason for the select board to make that change. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Any further comments on this? Mr. Vanscoya. You're muted.
Still learning. So thank you to everyone who has spoken. Thank you to those who I've spoken to individually prior to this meeting. And I just want to offer some, a little bit of fill-in information for people. The man you see on your screen identified as V. Sessling, I've known for years as Skip. Some of you may know, some of you may not, that he is a former select board member and chair, Skip. I can't remember if Skip was a chair, but he's also himself the most recent of, I think it was 3 poet laureates that Brookline has had since the establishment of the program. The establishment of the program is due in part to a former select board chair, Ken Goldstein, who was instrumental in raising some money to help fund the program in its inaugural year. And this, I've been aware that we've had a poet laureate for any number of years now because, among other things, the poet laureate is featured at the Martin Luther King Day observances. And it's a very moving part of that program. It highlights poetry, it spotlights poetry, excuse me. It brings to the occasion the sort of elevated thinking that goes into expressing important ideas in a very sort of, in a fashion that challenges our minds, challenges our imaginations, challenges our ability to think deeply in a short form, a short art form, and to kind of expand our awareness for a moment in time through the magic of words. And this program has the potential to continue that and to build on a record of success with 3 poet laureates that have already served. And I just would urge the members of the Brookline Arts Commission, excuse me if I'm getting the name wrong, that this doesn't have to be an either or. I think it's wonderful that they want to have a literary laureate program, but for the life of me, I cannot grasp why the literary laureate program has to replace the already successful and well-established poet laureate program. And I have heard offered that there are reasons of funding, but as Skip said, that could be dealt with one of 2 ways. It doesn't have to, by the way, a little bit of information for everybody. The existing program offers an honorarium of $1,000 a year to the poet laureate. So that's the kind of money we're talking about. And it probably could be a successful program with or without that honorarium. I think the honorarium is a nice thing to do since we do put expectations on the poet laureate, that the poet laureate will visit schools or in other ways sort of spread appreciation of literary arts, as Skip said. But on the other hand, it's probably a doable program without the honorarium. It's also probably not beyond the resources of the town, despite everything we've heard lately about the crisis we're in, to find $1,000 a year to continue the poet laureate program if it came down to that. So I do hope that that this does not have to be treated as an either or, that we will find a way to continue the poet laureate program. And on the question of whether there is whether there's a problem in finding applicants for this, I must say, I think Skip already spoke very eloquently to that question. I'm sorry, but I just have to say I don't buy it. And I'm going to cite something that got my competitive spirits kind of boiling. And this happened just not too long ago. And I'm just going to read the news announcement. a Cambridge poet, has been awarded this year's Nobel Prize in Literature.
Oh,
Louise
really?
Gluck won the 2020 prize for her unmistakable poetic voice that with austere beauty makes individual existence universal. She is the first American to win the prestigious award since Bob Dylan was honored in 2016. I am so happy for Cambridge and for Louise Gluck that the Nobel Prize has been conferred on someone who is literally in Brookline's backyard. But I also have no doubt that we have very award-worthy and esteem-worthy poets in Brookline. Absolutely no doubt. I mentioned to one neighbor that we were going to be discussing this topic, and that neighbor immediately said, oh my gosh, I've got a neighbor who's been published and has been awarded all kinds of grants and has been given all kinds of recognitions and honors. She didn't know about this program. I just think we've got poets that we haven't recognized yet in our midst. And I think the Poet Laureate program is the program through which to do it. So I want to see it continue.
Any other comments from the select board? Ms. Heller? You're muted. You're muted, Ms. Heller.
Also known Skip for many years and appreciate his talents in both poetry and literature. But I do think that focusing on just poetry is a narrowing of our literary understanding in and among people in the town, and I think that it's really important to promote literary understanding across all fields, not just poetry, but fiction and nonfiction. And so I'm torn because I think this is very worthy, having a poet laureate. I understand the funding constraints. And I mean, I suppose we could amend the program to have two laureates, one who focuses on poetry and one who focuses on other literary forms, and divide the stipend. We could do that. We could, the other thing I think we ought to think about doing is limiting, we've only had 3 poet laureates in all this time. And I'm thinking that we should, one way we could do it is to have a poet laureate one year, a literary, perhaps focusing on fiction one year, another year, in the third year, have a cycle. The third year have someone who's focused on nonfiction. And there may be other categories that the commission wants to consider, but I think that's another way of doing it. So I would suggest that the commission come up with a proposal that would accommodate all of these different forms without the select board having to dictate that, and consider the fact that we might want to have 2 in a year and split the stipend. Another way to do it is to, as I say, alternate. I do think that would open up the pool to more applicants. And I would be eager to see that. I think we've only had 3. I think it's and one of the reasons we've had, I remember Judith Steinberg, who's wonderful, was a poet laureate for several years. And I suspect part of the reason was, A, we really didn't want to lose her, but also it was difficult to find someone else who was focused on poetry. If we opened it up, we might have a larger pool of applicants for this and bring a greater understanding of all kinds of literature to people in the town, including our children. I'm really thinking about, and Judith did a wonderful job there. And I'm sure I'm not on the school committee anymore, so I don't hear as much about it from the schools, but I'm sure Skip has done that as well. Anyway, that would be those would be my comments. I think, I'm not opposed at all to changing. I think we need to figure out a way to make it inclusive. And also I would like to see the person changed I would like to see a rotating, more people in the pool and a rotating system so that we don't have someone being in the position for so many years.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, I had my 2 cents.
You can't
know,
see, huh?
I'm
But
sorry.
Raul wants to say something.
You're down on the bottom of my screen. I missed you.
I
Go ahead.
promise I'll be brief. I know we have other business, but this is important, of course. So, I appreciate folks weighing in on this. We've got ourselves a good old-fashioned academic debate, don't we? I'll just say that my thoughts are aligned with Select Board Member Heller's on this. I think that there is an opportunity here to expand the scope and open the pool that I don't see in any way, certainly doesn't eliminate poetry, and nor does it minimize the importance of poetry. I don't see that. I think there's a real opportunity here to expand the scope. I think we should have maybe another conversation about funding issues going forward. I am in alignment with Select Board Member Van Squack about our ability to work with the Arts Commission to make sure I take your point that this was something that was decided by the Select Board and then said, go ahead and figure out how to pay for it. So I do take that point from the chair of the commission. So that's maybe another conversation we can have separately about that. But I guess I'll just end there. That's it. I think there's an opportunity here to invigorate this program, to get more people interested and excited about it, and that as Select Board Member Heller said, we should consider each year with the appointment of the literary laureate to consider whether or not a poet has been the laureate in a certain amount of time, those kinds of things. That should all be part of the consideration when selecting one. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Hamilton.
I'll be brief, I promise. The thing that comes to mind is recruitment. And in a volunteer form of government like we have in Brookline, we really need to rely on all of our networks to help get the word out and recruit people. So just because you're on a particular board or commission, this goes for the Select Board as well. Sometimes our own networks don't produce the results that we want. We have to ask for help from other people to help amplify when there is a vacancy and a desired skill set. So please reach out to us when you encounter these types of problems so that we can be part of the solution.
Okay. The Select Board, the town, doesn't give you funds to go out and fund the Poet Laureate. We do give you a different type of currency, which is probably more valuable than money, and that is the credibility of the town. And I think that's something that you need to acknowledge and use it out as you seek funding from other sources in the community. My view of poetry is that it's really different from literary arts in general. When we decided to incorporate poetry into the MLK celebration each year, it was for a very specific reason. At least my reason was, poetry has always been the art form that really takes people beyond the mainstream, beyond what's currently acceptable. It's really opened people's minds to struggles that people have, and gives both the people engaged in those struggles and maybe even their adversaries a window into why the struggle is important, and what type of new world can be envisioned. Now that may sound kind of academic, and it can be academic, but if it's seen in terms of just historically, for example, going back not too that very far in history, but the beat poets. How they challenge the status quo and the mainstream in America in big ways that had significant revolutionary consequences. Or think about the youthful slam poetry jams that we see today, or rap music, which has had a very significant impacts on the world in ways that an essay about X, Y, or Z what wouldn't have. So I think that poetry is special, and I'd like to keep the Poetry Laureate program for that reason, because it really adds a different dimension to how the town, how people within the town think of themselves and think of the issues that we're struggling with, in our essays and opinion writing. So those are my 2 cents. I don't think we can really address this issue tonight. What do other people think? I mean, should we sort of think about this over the next meeting or so?
Well, I guess I would just ask, does this leave them in a lurch? Do we need to resolve it through the select board?
Okay, how would that leave you in a lurch? I guess that's the question to the commission members.
It doesn't, practically speaking, it doesn't right now. We're not in a position to start the search just because, the pandemic's put us a little behind. We usually do this around March, April, but, we did vote on it in February to change it. So we were both looking to change it, and then also the pandemic happened. So practically we don't need an answer right now. However, it does seem that tensions are a little high, so an answer might be forthcoming. And just one quick point to Member Heller's comments. We need the select board to tell us what, or to approve any changes. We can't just go changing the parameters on our own, which is the reason we're here. So we're happy to go back and rethink things, but we also just need a definitive answer from you.
I guess I'd like to ask, how does the current structure of Poet Laureate limit what you can do? I mean, it talks about not just poetry, but literary arts in general.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. Who's applying? They're poets. I mean, you write another book, but this, as it is a poet position. So someone who writes nonfiction is not going to be a poet. So and to be quite honest, growing up in a working class background, I didn't read a lot of poetry. I read fiction and nonfiction. That's what brought me up educationally. So I'm not a literary person. I'm a musician. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But practically speaking,
you can't bring in musicians as a musician laureate either.
Well, actually, that was one of our original big ideas was an artist laureate. Okay. But that just really expanding it a bit too much. And there really isn't a national one musician like a poet laureate out there. But anyway, practically speaking, it does change the parameters, and I think. As you said, past poets laureate have gone into the schools. I don't think we've seen that as much, and I'm not blaming anyone in particular. It maybe just be a function of getting in with either the high school or other schools practically, and that's something that is slightly beyond our reach. So that's also something to consider. But we again unanimously considered this a better option in getting more people, from diverse backgrounds, both socioeconomically and educationally and artistically.
I echo all of that. That's the way that was the tone of every member in the commission.
Mr. Schlesing, very briefly before I make my final comment and we move on.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say one thing that I disagree with Daniel Gostin, and that is, if you want diversity and you want socioeconomic diversity, then poetry is the way to go, because when you start with novelists and you start with nonfiction, creative nonfiction, they sort of bury poetry. And just this week, Mary Jo Harjo, who is Native American, was reappointed as Poet Laureate of the United States. They've had Rita Dove as the Poet Laureate of the United States. She is African American. There are a number of poets that, as Bernard said, and I agree with him, it is the cutting edge of literature in America. You don't find that many novelists disagreeing with what's going on in the country. You do find a lot of poets. I read a lot of poetry on the internet every day, a lot of websites, and they are out in the forefront and have been in the forefront. And one of the things with Martin Luther King Day, I learned a lot from Chairman Green. He gave me some poems to read. One of them was by Gwendolyn Brooks, which applied to Chicago, but really was the same as the Brookline, Boston area. And I think it's up to you to find diverse poets from the commission, and I think it's up to the commission to find people from various socioeconomic backgrounds. The one thing I will agree with what Nancy Heller said is maybe 3 years is too long. It was always 2 years, and my term became 3 years, and it would be better going back to 2 years. And I think that would help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Before you go, Mr. Vanscoya, let me just say that we have a poet every year at the MLK event, Reggie Gibson, and he shows the breadth of poetry, but also he electrifies Brookline. I mean, we get more comments and excitement, in those comments from his presentations every year than anything that we do. So, I think that's an important point. Mr. Vanscoya, why don't you state your thinking?
I was going to mention Reggie, and I'm so glad you did. But I also want to mention, since Skip just mentioned, the reading he did of Gwendolyn Brooks, I never realized he got that idea from you, Bernard. I remember that. I mean, that was what, a year ago or 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
That's the kind of impression that poetry can make upon a person. And as I was listening to this discussion, which I think has been a very good discussion, I'm glad we're having it. I was also thinking about the poetic tradition in New England. My goodness, Elizabeth Bishop, Robert Lowell, Amy Lowell. I mean, to think of the poets that have risen to the top of the literary history of this country that have come from New England, and to think that we are, that we are seriously going to say, gee, we couldn't find a poet, or a poet didn't apply. I worry that we've taken the wrong approach to finding the laureate, in that, you don't find a poet laureate by putting the notice of an open position for poet laureate on the same page with the notice of an open position for a member of the Housing Advisory Board, which is essentially how we're going about trying to attract the next poet laureate. There's ways to do it. And we, the select board, can help. We can help with the recruitment. We can help with the funding. But if any message comes out of this meeting, the message I would love to have come out of this meeting is, don't find a way to create a literary laureate program that does not replace the poet laureate program, because we've had a good record of success with the poet laureate program, and I think we can have an even better record of success going forward.
Or expand the poetry aspect to it to a literary, to include literary arts. I mean, there's no reason I can't do that. Any rate, let's move on.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't think we're in a position to vote on anything.
Well,
How do
Bernard,
you
the
wanna-
question is, when are we going to vote on this? Can we, here's what I don't want. I don't want to take this up in a month or so and have to have this debate all over again. I've heard enough pontificating on the value and beauty of poetry. I believe it's beautiful too. Like, so if folks need maybe a week to consider this and vote at the next meeting, then at least it'll be fresh in our mind.
Well, don't forget, this is Thanksgiving. People are taking time off. I think a week is probably too short. But when is the commission meeting again? I could ask Daniel and Amy.
Yeah, we meet the first week of every month.
Yeah.
So you'll be meeting
Next Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So that gives you a chance to discuss this and to think about the ideas of other commission members, et cetera. So I think we should wait at least 2 weeks and give them that opportunity.
Okay, and let's come up with a proposal of our own, or maybe, 2 alternative proposals that we can vote on.
Okay, we'll come back with
Okay.
a revised presentation and proposal.
Well, I was saying that the select board should come up with a proposal or 2 alternatives.
Okay.
And, I guess, somehow we should consult with you, of course, but we'll work that out.
I do want to say, I think I'm a little bit unhappy about the way this is being presented, that the BCA has not made an effort to reach out and find poets. I think the people that were on the working group for this made a lot of effort. They reached out to their colleagues, literary colleagues. They reached out through networking. It wasn't a nothing effort. It was a big effort. So I just want to clear that up.
Through Boston University and Boston College English departments as well.
Yeah.
Point well taken.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, boards and commissions interviews. Following candidates for reappointment to boards and commission will appear for interview. Razal Haq, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, for the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. Mr. Haq, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to be on the Diversity Commission.
Okay. Well, happy pre-Thanksgiving, everybody. I apologize in advance. I think I'm losing my voice, but we'll power through it.
You're coming across very clear.
Okay, good. Thanks. All right. So my name is Razal Haq. I've lived in Brookline since 1998. I'm a technology strategist. What that basically means that I help companies with their information technology strategy. And so they can figure out like how technology can potentially help their business. In a very simplistic way, that's what I do for a living. The reason I reached out to the Diversity Commission is because I think community service is important. I think this is a really great way to give back. And also, I think that it's a really good way to connect with the community while trying to make the community better. And that's essentially why I was reaching out.
Great, thank you. Let's see, any questions? I'll start off with a question. So in your application, you say you lived in Brookline for more than 20 years, but it's my first time trying to be the change I want to see. So tell me what the change you want to see is.
Well, I mean, okay, so it's no secret that I'm a person of color. I'm not giving anything away there, but I'm a Muslim and I'm also an immigrant. And I'm thinking that, like, if I make myself available to the Diversity Commission, I may be able to provide some perspective that the Diversity Commission may not have access to. That's what I meant by that.
Okay. Any other questions? I think that's a good answer, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I can add to that. Like the other thing that like my technology background can potentially help. I think we all, well, I mean, what I have seen is that a data-driven approach to any project can eliminate biases. It can influence existing processes. And it can, even change behavior. So, I mean, technology has the potential to have a positive effect in diversity. And I'm also an artist. And I know that like art can potentially bridge cultures, and I can potentially help in the artistic diversity in Brookline. So yeah, my left brain and right brain are equally dominant.
Okay, I hope you recognize that data can also drive the prejudices that's put into the data. So I'm sure you do.
Absolutely. So can technology. I mean, if you have a bunch of people have the same biases building the solution, that bias is built in. Yes, absolutely.
All right, good. Mr. Fernandez, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just sort of following along with this. Thank you. And thanks for applying to be part of the commission. I'm wondering, are there specific issues where you feel like, the commission right now is taking up everything from issues related to housing, community engagement, policing, and many other issues from your view, watching maybe some of the meetings or having talked to the chair? What are some of the issues where you'd like to get most involved? Maybe one of the subcommittees that the commission has.
I think I like the idea of citizens outreach. I think the fact that like if I was involved and people saw somebody like me being involved, it will encourage other people that look like me to be involved. I think that could potentially help. I like the idea of yeah, I mean, that's a long way of saying that like I like the idea of community outreach.
Okay.
Does that help?
Ms. Hamilton.
So we, in our last conversation, we were talking about recruitment, and I'm just curious, how did you find out about the commission? How did you get involved?
Okay.
Great question.
I passively keep in touch with the going-ons of the town. This is my first time actively participating, but so I follow Brookline in social media. I get emails from Brookline. I participated in like various committee meetings over Zoom nowadays, but like, historically, like, over emails and such. And yeah, so I think I got a something in social media that says that different commission was looking for people to engage, participate. And I went down the list and I go, diversity, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, so that resonated with me.
All right. Okay, Mr. Van Square.
I'm going to start with a small joke. You don't write poetry by any chance, do you?
I was gonna open up with that. Like, yeah, I'm not a poet, photographer, painter, and graphic designer. Yes, but no poetry.
Because the poetry position pays. So.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Thank you for your interest in the commission and also for your willingness to put yourself out there and bring yourself forward. Correct me if I'm wrong. I do monitor a fair number of the meetings of the commission, and I'm not aware that you've attended any of their meetings. Have you had a chance to attend some of their meetings?
I attended the meeting. I attended your last, what's the last select board meeting? And I attended the citizen complaint, I believe, committee. They were working on how to figure out, like, if somebody was wronged upon, how the citizen can potentially complain within Brookline. So I attended that. One of the reasons I haven't gotten involved before is because my travel schedule is kind of crazy. Well, it was kind of crazy, but since the pandemic happened, I guess one of the silver linings is that travel is no longer exists. So I have more control over my time. So that's why I can potentially help.
And you're aware of the time commitment and so on that this would require?
I understand that the commission kind of have a multiple meetings during the month, but if I am participating in a committee within the commission, then I would be required to be involved multiple times within the week, and that's fine for me.
Okay.
One last question. Have you had the opportunity to introduce yourself to the chair, just to get, so that she is aware of your interest?
I have. I've spoken to her multiple times, and I've also spoken to other commission members.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Heller?
So you mentioned that your travel schedule has prevented you from engaging more directly in many of the Brookline town affairs, but I'm wondering in opportunities. But I'm wondering whether once the pandemic is over, and oh my God, we hope it is.
Yes.
Whether that's going to have an effect on your ability to attend meetings, et cetera.
I don't foresee that happening because there's certain things that I've changed in my life that to actually have a little more control over my time. Before I used to work for consulting organizations, consulting companies, but now I'm actually working on my own startup. So I have a lot more control over my time.
I see. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can handle that now.
Let me just conclude by, since you brought up that you're a Muslim, I want to note that the Quran is written in verse. So whatever that means. but secondly, more seriously, I do not want to for you to think that we think that you should be in a box, right? The Muslim box or anything like that. Absolutely.
And I don't want to speak for all Muslims, and
right.
I don't want to speak for all immigrants.
Yeah, I want to make sure that you don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. I think it's important, though, that we reach out to the Muslim community in the Boston area. Something that I've talked to people about. We just haven't had a way to do it, and I would hope that you would help bring your perspective and ability to reach out to new communities, new residents in a way that would really be beneficial to the town in general. So
I would love to.
Again, not in a box, okay?
No. Don't put me in a box.
No, I won't. I know how it feels to be in a box, okay? Okay, we'll be voting at some point in the future, and we'll let you know at that point. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
One of the most fun interviews that I've been part of.
I believe in fun select board meetings.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, next, CARES grant to the Brookline Food Pantry. Mr. Kleckner.
I don't think that's next.
Do I have the wrong agenda again?
Should be Commission for Women Terms.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I overlooked it. Okay. Commission for Women Terms request. Question of approving the request from the chair of the Commission for Women to change the terms for commissioners from expiring August 31st to terms aligning with the fiscal year July 1 through June 30. I take it people have looked at the materials that Devin has put in the packet, as well as other things. Any discussion of that? No.
I'll just say I'm surprised that we don't get more requests to align these things from other boards and commission chairs. So I was delighted to see the reasoning behind this proposal, and I'm glad to support it.
Yeah, I see Rebecca Stone is here. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Heather, for saying that. It's this has been on my mind since I served on the school committee, and I do believe that that it would be a great thing to align most of the boards and commissions with the fiscal year. I think it makes sense, but I'm only in a position right now to ask on behalf of the Commission for Women. So for reasons that I'm sure Devin laid out to you, that I had laid out to her in the past, it makes absolutely no sense to go September 1 through August 31st. It would be much, much easier and much more aligned with our calendar and process and the town's calendar and process to make it consonant with the fiscal year.
I'd like to ask Mr. Kleckner, and it makes sense to me. I can understand why you would want to do it, Rebecca, but I'd like to ask Mr. Kleckner, I don't recall, we have various different commissions. Some get appointed 1 month, some another, and some another. Is that for a reason of, being able, there's so many boards and commissions, being able to stagger them within the town before the select board, or is there any rhyme or reason to it?
Well, my understanding is that many bylaws that create committees, several bylaws that are create the committee themselves, talk about this August 31st, September 1st deadline. And I don't know why. That's just the date that, and it's consistent. So it's not just one committee, it's multiple committees that have that deadline. So I'm not sure when that came into to effect, but I think it's been perpetuated. So we do, our practice is to do the annual appointments for that period, August 1st or August 31st. But we have no problems. That was the first thing I asked Devin, do you think it would complicate the process for you? And she said no. So we're happy if there's not a bylaw that regulates the Women's Commission to alter that. We just got to keep track of it for the future because it's sometimes.
So we'll have to do it commission by commission. Is that what you're saying? We have to, if others want to change, we would have to do it, in that way, or just bring all
again,
of it?
there was nothing in the Women's Commission bylaw. Is that correct, Rebecca?
That's right.
So you could do it at your own initiative, or you could have, as Ms. Stone did with the Women's Commission, you could come to you. But the ones that are set by bylaw, you could not do. You'd have to have town meeting change those.
Do we have a list of those that are set by bylaw?
I don't have them handy, but I could create one.
I think it'd be useful to know which ones are and which ones aren't.
When I was reviewing this, I looked through a number. It seems to be more habit than it is in the actual bylaws for most of the commissions. And so it should be relatively straightforward. I'm sure Devin's been doing so much great work on updating all of our processes around commissions and boards and appointments. I'm sure she probably knows better than any of us what the differences are.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, I move approval of the request from the Chair of the Commission for Women to change the terms for commissioners from expiring August 31st to terms aligning with the fiscal year July 1 through June 30. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, Ms. Stone.
Thank you so much. This will really help. I really appreciate it. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Okay, now, CARES grant to the Brookline Food Pantry. Question of authorizing the town administrator to enter into a grant agreement with the Brookline Food Pantry for food security in accordance with the federal CARES funding. I take it that means using the federal CARES funding. I see that Ms. Bowen is here. Is it Bowen?
Bowen, that's correct.
Bowen.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yes,
So,
why don't I start, Mr. Chair, and also want to acknowledge Elizabeth's presence this evening, and I'm sure she'll have some words following my remarks. So tonight is, very exciting event, I feel, and that is to authorize or to approve the funding from the town's federal CARES grant to the food pantry, as was discussed and in a compromised budget resolution that was enacted by town meeting just last week. So given the immediacy of this need, as well as the fact that the grant is closing down at the end of the calendar year, we want to get this moving quickly. And so reached out to Elizabeth on Friday, and she was very excited, I think, to accept the grant, and she can tell you a little bit about how that will help. But wanted to get this moving, and so this evening, I'm asking for the board to make this award from the CARES grant, make it subject to a grant agreement. I think you've seen a draft, but we're still tweaking that a bit. So, but making it subject to a grant agreement and authorize me to execute that on behalf of the board. You know, I don't know if the board wants to follow up on any of the discussions of the town meeting or any other further comments, but at some point also would want to give Ms. Bowen an opportunity to speak.
Well, I'd like to give Ms. Bowen an opportunity to speak, and then I have a couple questions, and I'm sure other board members would, just to get a sense of how this is going to work. So, Ms. Bowen.
Great. Well, thank you, all of you, for the opportunity to speak this evening. And it's nice to see so many of you. I feel like months ago, so many of you reached out to find out what was going on at the food pantry and how we were faring. So it's good to see so many of you again. Basically, we have just been juggling the best we can to continue with the same services that we have always provided at the Brookline Food Pantry. Prior to the COVID-19 crisis starting, we used to assist approximately 150 to 175 families per week. Right now, we are seeing about 650 families per week in person at our 3 pantry locations, as well as assisting with a new service. We deliver foods to 130 residents in Brookline per week. That's mainly the elderly and a few people with health issues who should not be leaving their homes. In addition to that, we're thrilled that we were able to start up the Brookline Thrives program again in October. Even when the schools were remote, we were handing out food on Friday afternoons to any public school of Brookline student who needed it. And right now that number is just about 500 bags per week. So you can imagine the stress that this has had on a system that was about a quarter of the size just 8 months ago. We have been supported incredibly by the town, especially in terms of volunteers. I find from the Greater Boston Food Bank meetings that I attend every 2 weeks that many pantries who were not able to secure funding had to close down, or many of them had to have very, very limited services to their communities. And I'm really honored to say that we have had over 160 different volunteers helping us out in the last few months, and just to make sure that we can stay open and serve as many people as need us. So what we are seeing right now is, you know, some of the CDBG monies are running out now. The funds were very needed and came at a critical time for us. However, those funds are about to run out. So these funds will really be helpful, even though I know the availability is about a month here. But we've also just been struggling to really keep up with how we are able to store all of the food that we need week from week to be able to feed these over 700 families. The Brookline Public Schools were very generous with us, and when they closed in the spring, we were able to use both the Lincoln schools and the Lawrence schools for storage, especially refrigerator and freezer space, but also dry goods. At the end of August, we did have to move out of both of those buildings, and we were forced to spend tens of thousands of dollars on new refrigerators and freezers that we've been able to keep at our 3 pantry locations. Luckily for us, United Parish stepped up and is allowing us to use some space in their church for dry goods storage. However, we really want to spend some money at 218 High Street, which is just around the corner from one of our pantry locations at the High Street Veterans, Brookline Housing Authority units. They have granted us a space that we would be able to use for storage. I believe I was told it used to be a sort of a community policing site when there were police on site at the High Street Vets location. So it hasn't been used in decades, and it looks it. So we do need quite a cleanup and a bit of renovation before we can move refrigerators and freezers and shelving in and make it clean enough and safe enough for a food-worthy location. So that will be quite a bit of help. This money would be quite a bit of help to be able to do that. We also just have a lot of costs coming up because, of course, prior to COVID, we did not anticipate needing to get tents and heaters and lights, all kinds of things like that, which will be critical in the coming months because we are serving all of our clients outdoors and will be until, certainly for the near future. And until the weather warms up again, it'll be very tough on both volunteers and clients alike. So we want to do everything we can to make that just as feasible and comfortable for people. So a lot of these costs that are coming up that certainly I really do need to pull together a little bit better. I'll be honest and admit that this really just kind of came to fruition after a lot of talk last week. And we have spent the last 3 days at the pantry preparing for and actually serving the last 3 days just about 600 families this year, an increase of over 33% who needed turkeys and dry goods and produce and pie for Thursday. So I was happy to spend my time doing that, but now I need to spend a little more time pulling these numbers and figures together for all of you.
Great. I have a couple questions. First of all, I used to work for the Attorney General's Public Charities Division, and which made me very suspicious of charities. However, I can say about the food pantry, they are properly filed their forms with the Attorney General's office, and their IRS 990 form is up to date as of 2019, which is not the norm among many, many charities, okay? So, when you give money to the Brookline Food Pantry, that money is going to go to a good cause, and you can be confident that it's not going to be squandered or wasted or otherwise misused. I guess we got a letter from someone asking about, actually not addressed to you, but addressed to town meeting, and questioning why there's so much talk about food insecurity, but very little connection of that discussion with food insecurity of seniors. As you said earlier, you do provide significant services to seniors in your food meal delivery program, but could you sort of elaborate and talk more about how you help seniors who are facing food insecurity?
Sure. We see anywhere between 30 to 38% of our clients are senior citizens. It's really touching to speak with them and get to know them. Many of them have, most of them, I should say, have lived in Brookline for decades. In fact, many of them are immigrants and came to the United States in the 1980s and 1990s. At that time, they talk about the great opportunity they had to come to the United States and work, many of them to be able to practice their religion freely, all this kind of stuff. But in fact, many of them had limited English skills and were not able to procure jobs that paid well. So I think these senior citizens did the best that they could while they were working. Now they're retired and they're living on very, very strict budgets. So with all of the increase in costs to their housing, possibly their medical needs, heat costs, transportation costs, all kinds of things, many of them do find themselves short on money, especially when it comes to buying food. I'll also just add in that the Brookline Senior Center had a survey a couple of years ago, and it was really quite heartbreaking to find out that over 30% of the citizens who filled out the survey for them admitted that at least once a month, they had no food in their home at least one day out of that month. And it's just so heartbreaking to think that this could happen in a town as affluent as ours. So we really did a lot of outreach with the BHA, with the senior center, and with houses of religion to really expand our outreach to senior citizens and to let all of them know how welcome they were to come to us, that they were not going to be asked any personal questions about how much money they have or what kind of Social Security they take in or anything like that, that they were welcome, that when they came to us and told us they needed help with food, they would be given that help. So we continue to help so many senior citizens. I will tell you, a lot of them still come to the pantry, even though we have offered delivery service to them. It's kind of their one time to get out of the house and socialize. And they do tell us how kind the volunteers are to them. And they love having a little conversation with someone who's pleasant and kind to them. So yes, I mean, I agree that a lot of people focus on families and children, but the elderly in our town do need a lot of help.
I note that Paul Warren would like to speak, but first, any select board members have any questions or want to speak? Ms. Fernandez, and then Ms. Heller.
Sure. So thank you so much for being here. And, I think folks who've been paying any attention know that you've got a great operation, that it works well. And I think because you've received the CDBG funds from us before, also we feel confident in the fact that you can make use of these funds in the best way possible with the limited time frame that you have to actually utilize them. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I had an opportunity last night to help out over at St. Paul's and hand out some turkeys, which was a lot of fun. And so really encourage people to sign up for volunteer shifts when they can. One of the things I noticed out there was that there are a lot of folks who are older, but also immigrants as well, and some who speak languages other than English, including Spanish speakers, Russian speakers, and Chinese, probably Mandarin. While I was out there alone, I'm wondering if you can just talk briefly about how in your marketing you make folks who don't speak English aware of the services that are available through the pantry, and then also what kind of supports you might be thinking about for folks in person. There seemed to be a barrier there. I was able to help out in one situation with my not frequently enough used Spanish, but there seemed to be a barrier there for other folks, and how you adapt to that challenge.
Well, we are very lucky to have many volunteers, some remote and some on site, who speak several languages. So when we do give out written information or send emails to our clients, we do have it available in the 3 languages you just mentioned, as well as Portuguese, Cantonese, and there's one other we use. Sorry, it's slipping my mind. But we do send all information out in 6 languages. We do have a lot of follow up with clients, and these volunteers who speak several languages are willing to make phone calls for us to make sure that any changes to procedure or any information someone should have does get the proper information in their own language. And we do try very hard to encourage the volunteers who are on site and speak languages to work different shifts, so that hopefully there is someone who can help them. And a lot of times we do take just names and phone numbers again, and have one of our remote volunteers follow up with somebody who doesn't understand the information that we're giving them on site.
Great. So folks who are bilingual or multilingual and can help out with some shifts, I'm sure they'd be welcome.
Right, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Heller.
I wanted to ask you, when this, I know that many of our seniors have been food insecure for quite some time, and I'm wondering, you're saying that now 38% of your clientele are seniors. And I'm wondering whether pre-pandemic that was the case as well, and the proportions have remained the same, or have they changed?
I would say that there probably the senior citizen percentage has stayed just about the same. It could be a tiny bit higher, but that is one of the groups actually who have consistently come to us for help. We do see a lot more families with younger children. I think the percentage has risen quite a bit higher, and especially single parent families in the last 8 months.
Mm-hmm. So does that mean that overall the percentage of seniors has gone down, even though you're seeing the same people over and over? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, if it's 38% now,
yes.
So just pretend it's 40. So that means 1 out of every, 4 out of every 10 people are seniors.
Right.
But you're saying that families, that group has risen. So if they've risen, then the seniors have sort of declined.
Not in numbers per se, but in percentage, yes.
Okay,
yes,
that's what I was getting at. Thank you.
So, Mr. Warrant, I'm sorry, Mr. Vanscoyat, you wanted to add something?
I was glad to hear Raul Fernandez mention St. Paul's Church, which I will confess is near and dear to my heart. And I mentioned the St. Paul's history with this program only to emphasize the point that this program truly sprang up from the community. There were times way back when, early in my days being associated with the St. Paul's Church, where the food pantry basically was food brought to the Sunday service and put in a basket and carried up to the altar and then stored and then distributed on a regular basis every Sunday. And it grew and it grew, the need grew, the awareness of the need grew over the years. There was sort of a transformation of the program so that it was still had St. Paul's as one of its distribution locations, but is now obviously expanded way beyond St. Paul's and is under its own organization with its own, as Bernard Green pointed out, its own charitable status. And Elizabeth's leadership has been top notch. It's just amazing what she has brought to the program at a time when it needed it the most. I mean, who knew that COVID was going to come along? But it did. And thankfully, the program had the right person in place to have the ambition and the ability to expand to meet the need. And Elizabeth, I can't say enough about your good work with that program. I also want to say just a quick word or two about some people who, not in ways that always were appreciated by us as much as they should have been, but have been active to remind the select board and remind the town of this need. I'll mention Deborah Brown, I'll mention Bonnie Bastian. They wouldn't let us forget, and thank you, Deborah, thank you, Bonnie, that this need was growing. And one thing led to another. Paul Warren's going to speak, so I won't steal his thunder, but the people got involved in trying to figure out how do we make this something that everybody can get behind so that we can get something through town meeting. Mel, I'm going to embarrass you just a little bit and say, I don't know if I've ever seen the town move so quickly in the aftermath of a town meeting vote. So thank you, Mel. It feels good to see this happening tonight. And yet also let's be clear that we're sort of facing the question of the future of this program in terms of how much more need can it meet and what role can the town play in that. And there'll be some bumps along the road as we work that out, but that's going to be next. We haven't solved the problem tonight, but we're at least all on the same page and we're doing something that we can in the moment. And that makes me feel good. I hope it makes everybody feel good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warren.
Hi, thank you and good evening. And John, when have I ever had thunder? So first, I'm Paul Warren. I'm a Precinct 1 town meeting member and a member of the advisory committee speaking on my own behalf. I want to echo a few of John's comments. And it's not often that you get to come to a select board meeting and say thank you. Thank you to Deb and Bonnie and also Author Conquest, who put in the original amendment to force us to face this issue that they've been raising for quite a while. And without their persistence and leadership, we wouldn't be having this conversation this evening. I also want to thank who very rarely ever gets thanked, Mel Kleckner. Mel had a number of conversations on Friday and over the weekend with me and a number of other individuals to try to find a way to find the funding. And Mel was instrumental in doing that. And I think that, I really want to thank him for his willingness to look at ways to fund the food pantry. I also had a great conversation with Elizabeth, and she was so helpful in educating me as to the needs of the food pantry. And, food is so fundamental to our needs. And, the food was an easy check, but the refrigeration, the transportation, that's part of the food process. You can't feed people if you can't store it. You can't feed people if you can't drive it around in a refrigerated vehicle. So I know that we authorize up to $300,000 in CARES funds. I would encourage you to fund each and every component of that, of her needs, which is not just food, it's also refrigeration, and it's also transportation. And the last thing I'd like to say is that the consensus resolution was not just about the food pantry. It was also about the Brookline Housing Authority. And I would encourage you to after the important work is approved tonight, that you move on to the work of helping the Housing Authority. There are creative ways. I'm hoping that you'll ask Michael to come in and share with you what those ways may be to help make the living arrangements, the living conditions at the Brookline Housing Authority workable and safe for its residents, but also for the very important access to the internet that's needed. And Michael will share with you, I think, that there are pilot programs. There are other ways that the Brookline Housing Authority, pays water bills, for instance, that would be able to if we could get creative to look at those programs and those payments to be able to help underwrite some of the important programs at the Brookline Housing Authority. So with that, I want to say thank you for your consideration of this, and especially to Mel. I know how hard he worked over this, and just know that feeding people is just a start, and we should continue the hard work of looking at all of the needs within Brookline. And I thank you for all your work, and happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Can
unless
I just
anyone
make
else,
one more comment?
sure.
And that is that this obviously coming at a time when the holidays are here is, I think, a really important to the families who are going to be able to have a holiday that they never thought that they would be able to have, because the foods that they normally would get, like turkey or ham or whatever, perhaps the food pantry now will be able to supply. But also, I think it speaks to the generosity of the community and the town, and that we want people to be able to celebrate at this time of year. So I'm particularly grateful to the people who worked on this, to Mel, and to the petitioners, to Paul, to come up with a way to make this happen. Does this mean that the money has to be spent by December 31st, Mel, or just allocated?
No, it does not require the money to be received by the all the expenses have to be incurred by then. And I also want to remind everyone that this program is retroactive to March 20th, I believe. So any expenses, even those incurred retroactively, can be submitted. Our goal is to maximize this $300,000, Elizabeth. So we want to make sure and work with you. Justin Casanova Davis from my staff is available. He knows the grant very, very well and has a lot of dialogue between the granting agencies. So he can work with us to maximize this grant.
Okay, I move approval of authorizing the town administrator to enter into a grant agreement with the Brookline Food Pantry for food security in accordance for using federal CARES funding. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you, Ms. Bowen.
Thank you very much.
Okay, climate action letter. Question of signing off on a letter proposed by the Climate Action Committee to the legislature urging that the Commonwealth update the stretch code to a net zero energy standard. Ms. Heller, do you want to explain what this is?
I do.
And
Yeah, I
what
will.
we're doing here?
So I would have made this under, if we didn't have this issue on the agenda tonight, I would have mentioned it in our announcements and updates. But we did have a climate action committee meeting last night, and we considered this issue. The BBRS, which is essentially the state building code agency, if you want to call it that, has been considering changes to its regulations, and there are many groups which are urging them to update their current regulations. We actually have in Brookline have a stretch code, but again, it doesn't call for a net zero building. In this sense, the material provided in your packet is a copy of a pamphlet, in essence, which explains the whole net zero concept. And I think that the net zero stretch code would, if you look at the last part of that pamphlet, it talks about the three models or three areas that you can pursue in a stretch code, in a net zero stretch code, and that is efficiency, electrification, and renewables. And it still doesn't mean that you need to be fossil fuel free. The people who are working on this and the letter from Climate Action Committee does not talk about fossil fuel free per se. We don't want to be into the problem with that the Attorney General had cited in her opposition to Article 21. So you can have fossil fuels performing in your building, but it means you sort of offset those in other ways: electrification, efficiency, and renewables. And so that in effect, the net energy is zero. That's basically what it means. And there's Mass Climate Action Network and the Municipal Area Planning Council, which we belong to, have been working on this issue and asked municipalities to give their feedback to the state. So that's what this is all about, is us giving our feedback to the state. I would hope that you would look, the letter is in your packet. I would hope it believe it states the case very clearly. And I hope you would agree to endorse and support it. And that we would write a letter to the BBRS and its executive director, Dan Walsh, and with a CC to other state officials. Basically, I don't think we need to take the time to write our own letter. The problem here is we're a little bit beyond the deadline, which was today. And the Climate Action Committee got its letter in today. But we obviously would only be able, the earliest we would be able to do it would be tomorrow. And I think we should write a very short cover letter and say we endorse the Climate Action Committee if we do, and support the adoption by the state of a net zero stretch code. I think that would be sufficient in terms of our support. And that I think it's very important for Brookline as a municipality to express its views. We've been in the forefront of many of these climate issues, and I think it's important for us to take a stand on this one as well.
Okay, any discussion?
Let's do it.
Okay, so what are you asking us to do on this, Howard? Just
Well,
vote
I mean, the letter is in your packet.
All right, but we're not signing the letter, so.
That letter
What
we're not
is it?
signing.
Right.
What we're doing is endorsing, supporting, however you want to say it, that letter, the action by the Climate Action Committee, the stand that they took, the position that they took. And we urge the state to adopt a net zero stretch code, to update its stretch code, its own stretch code, to include a net zero standard.
Okay, so, you know,
I could work with Devin and to come up with a letter.
well, all you really need is a certified certified vote of the select board that, you don't need a lot of verbiage.
Exactly.
So I assume that the Climate Action Committee has done its due diligence in terms of why this proposal for Energy Zero provision in the Energy Code is appropriate. And I'm not a engineer or anything, and I sort of assume that you've done the homework that I haven't done, other than to generally understand what the issues are here.
Well, I'll say one more thing about that, Bernard, which is that about a year, maybe it's longer ago, we did have a subcommittee studying the concept of net zero for our schools. And so many of our members became very educated about this issue. And I think we had an impact on the town as a result of that. So many of our members really were very, very familiar already with what this means and how to continue to push the envelope on this. So.
Okay, any comments from the select board? Any opposition to voting to, what are we doing? Voting to approve the Climate Action Committee's position in the letter?
Well, to accept their recommendation and to support a net zero stretch code for the state.
Okay. Why don't you make a motion?
Okay, so I'll move that the select board agree with the recommendation of the Climate Action Committee, and that we urge the state to adopt a net zero stretch code provision in its building code.
As laid out in the letter.
As explained in the letter, and we can attach a copy of it.
Right. Okay. So all in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Next, public meeting policy. I take it that's Ms. Hamilton and Mr. Fernandez. You want to speak?
Lead the way.
So a few weeks ago, I think in mid-October, we first took this agenda item up to discuss a pilot of a couple of boards and commissions doing basically what we're doing, which is to record our meetings and post them publicly for people who can't make this date and time. So and the reason behind is access. And I personally think it might actually help with recruitment as well. We're starting to see a lot more viewership during COVID when people are able to access these video recordings than have traditionally been when we were all meeting in person. So I think we talked about 5 separate boards and commissions. You know, how they made the list, I basically used an imperfect system just based on my experience on the board of the boards and commissions that tend to do the work that, 1, impacts public policy the most, 2, get the most viewership, you know, have people talking about what's on their agenda, and 3, you know, with an equity lens. So using that metric, I came up with the Housing Advisory Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Transportation Board, Diversity and Inclusion, and I know I'm forgetting one of them.
Advisory Council on Public Health.
Yes, public health. Because we are in the middle of a pandemic. We've notified the chairs of all of these boards and commissions and the staff who support. And we took some feedback. Not everybody is as enthralled with this idea as I am. So we also took some public comment to be able to really understand, okay, if we do this, what are some of the unintended consequences? And I think that that was a worthwhile conversation. And so I amended my proposed language that I believe was submitted in the packet yesterday to give the chair of these boards and commissions a little discretion whenever someone feels uncomfortable. So I'm, Mr. Fernandez, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about the conversation that took place at the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. And, you know, essentially, you know, we talked for some time about this item. There are, you know, some of the concerns that came up, I'll name, and we've seen them before in a letter from the chair of the commission, Joan Lancourt. Questions about sort of these records being permanently available, our volunteers that are serving on these various boards, you know, are folks willing to sign up for that? You know, like some conversation about issues related to things like surveillance and deepfakes and stuff like that, which I don't think really passed muster. But I think for me, the most compelling concerns, and I appreciate what Select Board Member Hamilton's done here by providing some discretion to the chair, and that should be limited discretion, really, but is the idea that there are some people who might come forward, especially you can imagine at the Diversity Commission, to share a story that they want to share because they want to see action taken on by the town, but don't necessarily want you know, their story, in some cases their pain, to be recorded and available to be played over and over and over again. And also that some of the subjects that may be discussed are very sensitive in nature, very personal in nature. And again, folks might not want those kinds of, you know, they'll still, as is in the policy, will still be a part of the minutes of the meeting. So it doesn't mean that those, that sort of that encounter, that, you know, that public comment or whatever it is not captured in some way, shape, or form. But it provides a little bit more sense of anonymity or protection for the person who may want to talk about this, but may not want to do it in such a public and permanently recorded way. So I think that this amended version of the pilot project provides for the kind of discretion that would make it so you know, someone could request or the chair could determine that this is something that maybe you know, we can keep in the minutes, but doesn't need to be recorded and preserved in the way that it currently it would have been otherwise. So that's it. Obviously not everybody's fully on board with this. I do think the other important point is that this is for the main committee meetings, not for subcommittees at this point. So I will also note that both the task force to reimagine policing in Brookline and the select board's committee on policing reform are already following this policy on our own. So we're already not just recording these meetings, they're live streamed by Big, and they are available on each of our respective town websites for anyone to watch us work. And we haven't had a problem yet.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Ms. Hamilton for the memo you put together, which addresses something that I think was raised by Ms. Landcourt, I think is very legitimate. And that is that when you have a public meeting, the public also includes malevolent actors. And, she mentioned that some people, for a variety of reasons, may want to be anonymous. And what you did is to the chair is to advise people that they have a right to turn off the video, and something I don't think people realize, rename themselves in order to be further anonymous. And I guess I have a question for Ms. Fields. How do you do that? How do you rename yourself?
We probably need training in it.
I could probably field this question.
Okay.
I
and
think,
remember, it has to be easy.
and usually it is. So there are at least two ways. The host can rename you, and it's basically as easy as going to. So you go down to the bottom where it says participants. You click on it, and then when you see the name, you can usually click on yourself and try to rename. It should also give you the option to click on your name when you hover over your own image. But I've had mixed results when I've done that.
We're not suggesting that members of a committee can be anonymous, are we?
No, not members of the committee, but for example, someone testifying before the committee.
Yes.
An extreme example, a woman who is suffering domestic violence and speaking to a committee that's on a relevant subject, or whose charge is relevant to that, would not want to be public. Or in today's world, and hopefully on January 20th, this is going to change. But in today's world, someone could be making a statement in a public meeting that's relatively benign, and certain people could think that this is something that they should, do something about, harassment or worse. So.
I'll just also note what this doesn't change is what already exists is that any member of the public can record any public meeting. All they need to do is notify the chair of that meeting to record that. We've seen that happen back when we were in person plenty of times at advisory committee and in other meetings. So that that's still the law. So if even in the event that a meeting isn't being recorded necessarily, a member of the public could certainly inform the chair that they wanted to do that and can do so.
Yeah. Ms. Heller.
Well, first of all, I'm on a number of committees, as you know, and in the last 2 days, so the Climate Action Committee met last night, and we recorded ourselves, and the Cannabis Mitigation Advisory Committee met this afternoon, and we recorded that. So I think there are a number of committees which are recording themselves anyway. Without being told that they need to. I think that, so I have two comments. One, in the Cannabis Mitigation Advisory Committee today, staff informed people that they could change their name on their picture or not have their picture there. But I'm wondering, what about Zoom bombing? And if you've ever been Zoom bombed in a a meeting, you don't like it. It's awful. And it's only happened to Raul and I once when we were co-chairing a census committee, and we thought it was somebody else trying to get in, and you know, we were Zoom bombed. It was terrible. So I'm just wondering how that would play out in this, and how we would, especially if people are going to change their names, we're not going to be able to know whether that person, I mean, most of us know people who are mostly active, and other times people come and identify themselves as living at such and such a place or whatever. But if we're going to do this anonymously, I have some concerns about that. And I totally appreciate what Bernard said. We want to protect the privacy of people who are divulging information about themselves in order to make a particular point about something. So I just think we need to think that issue through. And I have no problem voting for this tonight, but I do think that as we go forward, we need to consider, you know, how we're going to protect these meetings from being bombed by anonymous folk.
So I have a couple of things to say. One, for most of the public meetings that we offer, you have to register in advance. And Ms. Fields reminded me in the chat that, you know, you can use a pseudonym, but we still have, you know, an email address, whether or not that's your primary email or you want to use a different email. But there is definitely a chance for Zoom bombers to gain access. I'm hoping that everybody understands that we're trying to recreate a public meeting. And in doing so, in most public meetings that were in person, everybody saw what you looked like. You didn't really have the luxury of anonymity. We are trying to provide that because of the very limited circumstances where, you know, we're discussing something of a particularly private and sensitive nature. But I'm hoping that the vast majority of the work that's done by the people who are doing the work, the volunteers and, you know, members of the public that show up, will use their real names and will have no problem being recorded so that people know what's going on and have a complete picture of who's participating.
Okay, I see Mr. Lefson from the commission would like to make a comment.
Promoting him to a panelist now.
Okay, hi. I believe you can hear me and see me at this point.
We can.
Okay, good. So Bob Lepson, town meeting member from Precinct 9, also a vice chair of the CDICR. So thank you. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Raul, and everyone for this. I guess where I'm coming from, and it's not the Zoom bombing per se that I'm concerned about, and it's not the members, I guess, of the public that I'm concerned about, although that's certainly an issue. And I've been in some meetings where the committee or the commission members themselves have expressed some deep heartfelt feelings that ended up that were just of a magnitude that you can't imagine. The emotions were running high, and there were problems that resulted. And I guess when Heather, you had mentioned that you're looking to try to recreate what happens in a live meeting, there's no recording in a live meeting either for the CDICR, right? Certainly anybody can record any public meeting. They notify the chair and say, I'm going to make a recording, and that is legal and that is permitted, and that's the way, you know, open meeting works. But without Zoom, nobody is recording any of these other meetings. And I think I guess the point that I'm trying to get across is that if these recordings in any way stifle the ongoing communications and stifle heartfelt feelings, and which ultimately I think can affect public policy, if it's a deterrent, I think it's potentially a problem. And, you know, and that might not be the case for the Zoning Board of Appeals. It might not be the case for, you know, the Council on Public Health or the Transportation Board. I think there's something that's a little bit different about the CDICR compared to some of these other boards. And I guess I'm just asking everybody here to take that into consideration. Maybe separate the question, as people often say at some of these meetings, that maybe vote separately on each of the different boards that you're proposing, as opposed to doing one fell swoop. I think that would be helpful and would be the way that I would suggest. So thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Van Scoyac? You're muted.
Thank you. I do a couple of points, and I do want to thank Bob and others on the DICR commission for, you know, making us all aware that this is not a, you know, it's not a proposal without its complications. On the other hand, I think Heather's done a very good job of addressing the complications, and the points that I want to make in the context of Bob's comments are these. Let's not overlook that having recorded a meeting, the decision whether to make the recording public follows the meeting. So there's always going to be the opportunity at some point before the recording is then put on the website to be available to anybody subsequent to the meeting to view. There's always going to be the opportunity, based on what happened during the meeting, to make a decision as to whether there's something ultra sensitive, or the meeting got Zoom bombed, or you name it, that would mitigate, the question and lead to a decision perhaps to withhold putting this out for distribution. But we don't have to carve out an exception, in order for that to happen. The other thing I want to mention that I don't feel gets mentioned often enough in these conversations is we are in effect denying people access to meetings that are intended to be public meetings by virtue of scheduling more than one meeting in the same time slot. And when we do that, we have a certain obligation to give people an alternative means of attending that meeting. How can a person be in two places at once? They can't. So we have to sort of acknowledge the reality that
that's always been a problem.
Yeah, we don't always hold our meetings in such a way as to be convenient. And if we can make them more convenient for people to access, we should. One more point, and then I'll stop. And Raul knows this well, and Bernard knows this well. The work of the Reform Committee on Policing and the Task Force Reimagining Policing have embraced some very, very deep discussions, and very, very, raw and heartfelt and difficult discussions. But we're all better off for those discussions and for the manner in which they were managed and conducted. And those who learn from those discussions subsequently by viewing those tapes are participating in a very important discussion that's going on in Brookline right now. And it's unthinkable to me that we would say, well, sorry, it was good enough for the people who actually participated at the time, but if you weren't there, you missed it, and we're not going to make it available to you. That just doesn't seem to me to be a transparent way of doing business. And the other thing that Raul and Bernard and others of us know is that often the viewership of these meetings in the recorded version afterwards is greater than the viewership in real time. So we have to take that into consideration too. If these meetings are for the public, they're for the public. And in the virtual world that we're in now, for the public means in real time or, what do you call it? When you schedule your own viewing of it later. Sorry, I'm not using the terminology, but people get what I mean.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there before I forget some other word.
Yeah.
So
Ms. Hamilton.
if I could just say a couple more things, Ms. Fields again reminds me that you have the option of calling in, and phone numbers are not advertised. So there's a degree of anonymity there should somebody choose to use that option. And then, this is a pilot, and two things on that. One, I said that it will come back to the select board. We will have a public hearing when hopefully this nightmare ends and we can go back to some sort of in-person system of government. And we can certainly, talk about the pros and cons of what we learned from this pilot. And there will be a before and there will be an after when we hopefully have voted on this. So we can really understand whether or not this did discourage participation or whether it did, in fact, encourage people to tune in.
Okay, I'd like to vote, but first of all, let me just say that Ms. Hamilton put together, I think, a very good memo on this, and we're going to vote on a policy. So I'd like to suggest that that memo be put in the form of a written policy that we can put on our website so that people who want to know about the policies that we've been voting on can go there and find them. There are a lot of policies that have been voted by this board over the years, including some pretty significant ones like requirement that we hold public hearings under some circumstances that I can't find written down anywhere. So if you can put that in the form of a policy, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just something we can put on our website. I'd appreciate it. So I move approval of a policy requiring the recording of public meetings for the following boards and committees: Advisory Council on Public Health, Commission on Diversity, Inclusion, Community Relations, Housing Advisory Board, Transportation Board, and Zoning Board of Appeals. All in favor, Ms. Heller? She said aye. You're muted.
Muted, I'm sorry. I'm doing what Devin tells me to do. And then
I can read you. I can read your lips.
You don't have to hear my dog barking.
All right. Okay. Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van-Scoyoc?
I say aye, but I would point out too that when you read that back to us, you left out the language referring to posting the next within one business day. So I don't think there's any confusion on that point, but I just wanted to make sure that others agree that that's part of the language of the vote.
Is that in your memorandum?
It's
Okay.
it's in Heather's, yeah.
Okay.
And I say aye.
It's not on our agenda, but I'll take that as an amendment. And I guess chair votes aye. Okay, next, warrant articles. We do have a warrant article for reconsideration, and that's warrant article 28. And our esteemed state representative, Tommy Vitolo, is the person who has submitted this amendment to warrant article 28, and he is available to explain to us, number one, why he's interested in this, and number two, why he thinks this is a good amendment.
Sure. Thank you. And we'll try to move reasonably quickly because I know You guys work really hard and put a lot of time into this. My name is Tommy Vitolo. I am the state representative from the 15th Norfolk District, and that makes me an at-large town meeting member. Article 28, which would require 3 different groups of people to take a fiscal or financial training course, town meeting members, advisory committee members, and then a subset of other board and committee members. I had asked moderator Gadsby about dividing the question, allowing us to vote on each 3 of those categories separately. And he said he would certainly allow that motion, but stated a preference for filing my interest as an amendment instead, believing that it would be more clear to both town meeting members and those following along on Brookline Interactive Group. And so I have done that. I have filed an amendment that would strike the fiscal training requirement from obligation from town meeting members. And I did that for a couple of reasons. Town meeting members are registered voters directly elected by voters in the precinct. And the town meeting members are chosen based on their values, their expertise, their interests, based on what the voters in their neighborhood decide is important. And town meeting members have no other requirements. Town meeting members are not obligated to read the combined reports. Town meeting members are not even obligated to attend town meeting. There is no ability for Brookline to impose these requirements because state law lays out the framework for representative town meeting. And since there can be no enforcement mechanism, and since it is the voters who ultimately must decide which strengths or interests or values are in the best interest of those voters, I believe it is inappropriate to require any topical coursework of town meeting members. I'd further add that fiscal or financial training may not even be the most important training for town meeting members. Zoning ultimately has a more significant financial implication than the budget does. Catastrophic climate change will have a greater impact than zoning. And social justice issues, while difficult to assign dollar values, clearly have a critically important role in our society. And yet no one has proposed training course obligations of town meeting members for those categories. If the fiscal training course is any good, I'll certainly attend and will encourage others to do so. I say if because we have no idea, in fact, what the contents of the proposed fiscal training course are. But if it's any good, I'll attend and I'll encourage town meeting members to attend. I'll also encourage them to attend town meeting, to read their combined reports, and to floss daily. But encouraging is a long way from requiring. It is the voters who choose what's important to them. And I believe we ought to simply let them have their say. So I encourage you, the select board, to vote yes on the Vitolo amendment and then decide what you want to do on the Warrant article as amended afterward. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? Mr. Renskoyak, saw your hand.
Question for Tommy, our state rep. And thank you for taking an interest in this. What's left after we take that paragraph out?
There are a couple of things left, right? So there would still be a requirement that advisory committee members, who of course are appointed, not directly elected to the advisory committee, to take the course. There would still be a requirement for folks serving on other boards and committees and commissions who have a impact on fiscal policy, I guess loosely, to take the course. And there would still be the requirement that town staff take attendance of the course and publish it. And so town meeting members who attended voluntarily, if the Vitolo amendment were to pass and the Warrant article were to pass, it would still be public record that they attended. And ultimately, if the League of Women Voters or if an individual voter felt it was important that their town meeting members take this course, that voter would have that information and could use that information in casting his or her vote in a May election.
So I offer this purely in the spirit of you and I love to debate issues, and please take it in that spirit. So, Mr. Vitolo, do I hear you saying, as people on Beacon Hill are wont to say, that town meeting should require something of others that it will not require of itself?
Yes, town meeting should require things of others that it does not require of itself. And it does that all the time in lots of different areas, right? We have obligations for boards, committees, and commissions that don't apply to town meeting now, and that's fine. Because town meeting members are elected directly by the voters, not appointed by an august body such as yours, indeed, it is reasonable that there are different requirements of them than there are of folks who serve at your pleasure or the pleasure of the moderator or any other appointing body.
And you don't feel there's any awkwardness in saying, you folks over there on the advisory committee, you figure out all this fiscal stuff, and we're going to make you attend a course so that you understand it, but we don't have to figure it out. It's the town meeting that makes the ultimate decision, and perhaps some could argue needs to understand it most of all.
Well, so it's the town meeting that makes the ultimate decision on zoning articles. It's the town meeting that makes the ultimate decision on noise ordinances. We certainly don't expect town meeting members to take an hour-and-a-half course on acoustics in order to make that decision. Right? It's town meeting who will make decisions about whether or not we will prioritize different forms of policing, but we don't require an hour-and-a-half course on criminology or social justice or social work. Right? Town meeting members are not obligated to become experts in anything, although in the case of our town meeting, we have loads of experts, as you and I know, and we celebrate that. Town meeting members make judgments on a variety of issues based on a variety of factors and due diligence in making those decisions. But to require a particular course that we have not explained what it contains, we have not explained whose biases are brought into teaching it, and we have not explained why that topic is so much more important than all the other topics, doesn't make sense to me, above and beyond the reality that it doesn't make sense to have a requirement that's unenforceable in the bylaws in the first place. And you can't require town meeting members attend because you have no way to inflict any punishment if they don't.
Other than putting their name in the tab and embarrassing them. Mr. Fernandez.
You can do that now. You don't need a bylaw to do that.
That's right. You're right. Mr. Fernandez.
Thanks. You know, and that last point I think is an important one. This is one that came up in our discussion. I think we decided to just because you know, the thought is that this kind of knowledge is so helpful that even though there's no possible way to mandate it, we were going to say we were going to anyway. And I remember talking about sort of not being a big fan of naughty lists and things like that published. I don't think that's a particularly helpful way to get people to behave in the way that we want them to. You know, also, you know, I think that I understand why this is desirable, why we would want people to be more informed about it for any number of reasons. I mean, frankly, I think if town meeting members with a more progressive view were more familiar with the budget, I'd love to see more amendments come forward that also take into account some of the, you know, the budget realities that would move us in a more progressive direction. And I am also what Representative Vitolo just said about who's delivering these trainings. You know, I'll just offer this too. And there's a lot that's been said about the progressive budget amendments that have come before town meeting and how they're going to cost us all of this money and they haven't been well thought through. Meanwhile, we find ourselves in a structural deficit. I would say largely because of conservative policies, particularly around zoning, that have actually put us in that place, right? So I think there's a lot of education around finance that needs to go around. That said, yeah, I didn't like it before. I don't particularly like it now. It doesn't make sense to require things of people and not have any actual means to require it of them. It's just dumb policy. And I think if folks that were new to town meeting had brought this up, I think folks would have said that earlier. And it's because there are folks that are very much involved that we don't, I think, cast the same critical lens on the policies that they bring forward. At least that's my view. So, I'm willing to hear more of this out, and I don't think what the representative's saying is wrong here.
Okay, I see Ms. Heller.
At one level, I mean, Tommy is correct. We can't, we're asking people to do something that we can't really, it's difficult to enforce. On the other hand, we ask people to do things in our society all the time that are difficult to enforce, like even in this current pandemic. Now, it's granted that, whether they take financial training, it's not a matter of life and death, as mask wearing is, but we do mandate mask wearing and we don't really enforce it. So we approach it with the eye towards educating people as to why masks are important. And in the same way, I would like, and perhaps what we could do, we could reword this. This could be reworded so that it's very strongly suggests that town meeting members should do this without actually mandating it. For instance, you could say, somebody would provide, the advisory committee or the moderator would arrange for educational training, shall arrange for educational training for all town meeting members. And we need a culture here, a cultural change of people thinking that when they become a town meeting member, they need to learn some stuff. I didn't have any training when I got to town meeting. I went, what? Municipal budgets, what? And I mean, it takes time. It takes a lot of time to learn it. And I've been in town meetings since 1988, and I'm sure I don't know everything about it. And I'm sure that I could benefit from additional training. So, and I think it's important for people who are signing up for town meeting to understand that there is some responsibility here to their constituents, to the town, to their fellow town meeting members, to understand what it is that what the rules are around municipal budgeting. And who we'd get to provide that, I don't know. But maybe if we change the language such that we suggest that this is highly desirable and it will be provided, and then,
Okay, are you
attendance will be
proposing
taken. Pardon me?
are you proposing a select board amendment to this?
Well,
If
yeah,
I
I guess.
may- If I may, Select Board Heller raises a really important point. If the Vitolo amendment passes and warrant Article 28 passes, then by the bylaw, this training will have to be offered, presumably several times per year, for advisory committee members and members of other boards, committees, and commissions. And those courses, that training will be open to the public, both to town meeting members and anyone else in the public who would like to attend. And in warrant Article 28, that attendance would be recorded. And so by passing the Vitolo amendment and warrant Article 28, the language doesn't at this moment say we strongly encourage anyone to do anything, and whether or not that belongs in a bylaw is subject to interpretation. But we would know that those courses would be available because they would need to be available for groups 2 and 3, and that attendance.
Well, I think it's important to say these are available for town meeting members, because town meeting members may not realize, if you're going to say it's the advisory committee and members of the public and members of boards, they may not realize that they're included in that group. And I would not exclude them from being offered this training specifically.
Yeah. By the way, but I agree with your amendment, Representative Vitolo. But I'm wondering why you don't include in your strikeouts what's called the elected and appointed officials appointed to any board or commission, or at least take out appointed officials appointed to any board or commission. Just like town meeting members may be elected to the town meeting, even if they have no interest in the financial aspects of town governance. For example, they may be an expert in social justice issues that are important perspectives to be included in the discussion at town meeting. Same can be said of boards and commissions. And I think maybe that is my concern, or my idea is that, maybe, we ought to encourage people, but not require it for anyone.
So if you wanted to offer an amendment that struck category 3 or a part of category 3, I think that would be interesting and worthy of debate. I'd have to think a little bit more carefully about it and see the language. I think clearly it's inappropriate for town meeting members, and that was where I saw what was, in my view, the biggest flaw. And again, as I initially proposed, just divide the question, but the moderator had a preference to the amendment. It is clearer to simply vote on an amendment rather than have a series of divided votes questions. So that's where I went with it. But again, if you want to propose an additional amendment, either to exclude more or to remind town meeting members that even if they're not required, they're encouraged, that would, I think, would be also worthy of doing.
Ms. Heller, are you going to make that motion?
I just want to make a point about boards and commissions. So they're not in the same category as town meeting members because they are volunteering and they are appointed. They are not elected. So if one of the if we want them to be trained in financial, municipal financial budgeting, and some of the boards and commissions really could use that, maybe not all, then we should require it because it's not the same as the town meeting members who put themselves up for election and somebody likes, they call themselves Joe Kennedy or John F. Kennedy and they get elected. My point is that, there he is. So my point is that it's a different animal, being elected and being appointed. Advisory committees the same. Advisory committees, many of them are elected to town meeting, but they're appointed to the advisory committee and they need to have that knowledge. And if they don't want to have it, then they don't need to be appointed and they don't need to.
The advisory committee is different because it's the finance committee, right? So,
yes, but what I'm saying is that there may be boards and commissions where it's important to have that knowledge. And so I would not exclude them. I really wouldn't.
Okay, Mr. Van Scoyoc, and let's think of how we're going to conclude this discussion. First of all, we have to vote reconsideration if we want to reconsider this, and secondly, are we going to propose a different amendment than Mr. Vitolo has proposed? Mr. Van Scoyoc.
I wanted to say that I agree, Chair Green, with the comment that you made about perhaps this could be addressed by removing the compulsory language and making it more in the nature of shall be offered. So I'd be happy to go along with that. I wanted Tommy to weigh in, excuse me, Representative Vitolo, I don't mean to speak disrespectfully. Representative Vitolo to weigh in as to whether that would address his concern. If it was non-compulsory, but had to be offered.
In fact, non-compulsory to town meeting members, but had to be offered is exactly what I have proposed. If you have different language that gets to the same spot, I'm okay with that too. If you want to make it non-compulsory for other groups as well, I'm okay with that as well. I think there's a real value to it being offered. And I think there's a value to taking attendance. But I don't believe it should be obligatory for town meeting members and would support language written several different ways that gets at that. So Select Board Member Van Scoyoc, absolutely. If you want to tweak a different part of the bill, of the warrant article and get at that same outcome, I'd be just as happy with that.
Okay, let's do this. We have to go and Ms. Hamilton, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say something real quick. I like where we're headed. So I don't want to, hold up the momentum that I think is about to produce a really good result. But I think part of this is trying to address a problem that people are starting to see, a frustration with our form of government. And the assumption behind it is we wouldn't have these problems if people just understood the budget. And, you know, I was somebody who wasn't involved, and then I got involved in town meeting, and now I'm on the select board. And arguably, I know about the budgeting process. And I don't think that taking a 1.5 hour course on, you know, the municipal budget would necessarily change my political positions on, you know, warrant articles as they come up. So I just want us to be realistic about what we're hoping to accomplish through this warrant article. I think we absolutely owe it to everyone to put out something that is neutral and that helps educate. But it's, I don't think, going to accomplish the result that a lot of people think was going to be accomplished through this warrant article.
Yeah, and how do we know it's going to accomplish that unless we give people tests and grade them? At any rate, I move reconsideration of warrant article 28, which is the first step. I'm okay. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyoc?
Aye.
Okay, now the hard, I'm sorry, chair votes aye too. Now the hard part. What are we going to replace it with? Just accept Representative Vitolo's amendment, or are we coming up with something unique to the select board?
Well, I think what we should do is not strike that language, but I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have the whole, oh, I guess I do, except it's under my computer holding it up so that you can see my face. But I would prefer to say that town meeting members shall be offered the training, financial training in municipal budgets. And we, you know, I agree with Tommy that taking attendance is critical, and I agree that advisory committees members must have it. And, you know, if they're not, then it's not going to be on the advisory committee. That's all. I mean, I think that, you know, just as we could develop a policy around boards and commissions and decide which ones we want to have. I mean, they probably all should, frankly, just so they understand the context in which they're working. But, and I agree with Heather that, you know, it's not going to, it may illuminate some people's thinking about various issues, but I don't think it's going to change people's politics. And I don't think I'm after that. I think you want that kind of training so that people understand the milieu in which they're working. Okay,
so Ms. Heller's proposal is to change the language with respect to town meeting members to make it something that's offered, not required. Mr. Van Scoyoc, do you have another way of looking at this, or?
No, I just wanted to be more specific about that proposal, if I may. I'll do my best. I'm looking at the wording that is in the combined reports. And just to be sure everybody is sort of familiar with what this is all about, this has to do with you know, an amendment to section 2.1.14 and article, an amendment to something that's already in general bylaws, okay? And it's a general bylaw that applies to some requirements for town meeting members and other officials in Brookline. And what the Article 28 in front of us does is it adds 3 sections, which in the combined reports are indicated by underlining. And in each of those 3 sections, there is some form of training that is required of town meeting members in one instance, of advisory committee members in the second instance, and of elected and appointed officials appointed to any board or commission, et cetera, in the third instance. And in each of those 3 sections, the wording, the operative wording is shall attend. shall attend, shall attend. And if we could change that in each of the three instances to shall be offered, I think that would take care of it.
Okay.
Well, I think that I agree with that as far as town meeting members are concerned. I'm not sure I agree with that in terms of I think advisory committee members must take it, must attend some financial training. You know, I'm in the finance committee, and they don't need to be appointed if they don't want to take it. It's not a matter of their having to be on the advisory committee, and they must do it. But I do think I can see that as a very useful thing, and giving them notice that you know that this is going to be expected if they want to be an advisory committee member. I don't have a problem with that.
Why can't that be a requirement that the advisory committee has, or the moderator has, as part of his appointment process? In other words, I mean, I like John's proposal, and that is make all three of them shall be offered, and you know, with respect to the advisory committee, it suggested it's the advisory committee that they make it mandatory. Are you about to say something, Ms. Hamilton?
So you're saying that the moderator would adopt a policy for his appointments, which would make it mandatory.
Yeah, I think that works.
I'm not opposed to that idea. I'm just wondering whether or not we're wading too far into a body that's not really controlled by us. And
that's what town meeting's doing.
But you know, the advisory committee, even within a few months of serving on the advisory committee, you really understand the budgeting process more than I think even you get as a select board member, because they do a lot of subcommittee work. So I understand that it is the town finance committee, but I could see it playing out where somebody gets appointed to the advisory committee and we don't offer one of our classes until, you know, 8 weeks into them serving, and then are they not allowed to do any work because they haven't taken this?
So quickly, Select Board Member Hamilton, the proposed bylaw lays out a time period. It's 120 days or something like that. And we know how the advisory committee feels about the requirement that the advisory committee take this course. This is the advisory committee motion. The advisory committee is on record for unanimously being in favor of requiring themselves to take this class. So I'm not sure, you know, the select board, of course, is welcome to recommend something else. But if the select board wants to know what the advisory committee thinks, the advisory committee thinks unanimously that the advisory committee ought to take this class.
Thank you for that clarification.
If I can jump in, you know, I think Heather's instinct is right here. It's one thing for us to provide a recommendation on something that's brought before us. It's a wholly different thing for us to rewrite what's been brought before us by, you know, in this case, you know, advisory committee and what town meeting is going to decide it wants to do for itself. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. I think it's reasonable for us to vote up and down once again on what we voted before, or to vote up and down on the amendment that's presented to us. But I certainly don't want to get involved in rewriting this thing.
Mr. Van Scoyoc.
I would just ask Representative Vitolo to consider the possibility, just the possibility, that the advisory committee's aim is to force town meeting members to have this education. And in order to do that, they had to include themselves as well. And that's why they are so enthusiastically in favor of this. I don't know what makes me think that, but I just think that.
Well, I mean, the advisory committee was really responding to the Brookline Financial Advisory Committee report.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, they may not want to do this, but, you know, they're under pressure to do so because, I don't know, the report said they should. So, okay, what are we going to do here? We're already in the we've already reconsidered. What do you want to consider?
Well,
Yes.
I would just deal with the issue that Tommy has brought to us tonight, which is the issue of town meeting members being mandatorily required. And in their case, we could say shall be offered. And we don't have to remove the language, nothing has to change. And they don't, and
if the select board is going to propose slightly different language that would keep my concern is we don't actually have the language in front of us, but select board member Van Scoyak's language proposal based on select board member Heller's comments about not requiring, but ensuring that the course is offered to town meeting members. That's something that I absolutely am behind as well. And I'm wondering out loud if there is language that is sort of coming out of this meeting that is just as attractive to me, but more attractive to some members on the select board, and perhaps whether or not the select board wants to make the motion or join with me or have me make the motion, I'm indifferent to. But perhaps there is slightly different language. We have time, right? Because we've got a whole week until town meeting.
Now, we don't have all that time tonight.
Correct.
And we
don't want to do it
there's
tonight.
holiday coming up, et cetera.
My
So-
point is if select board members Heller and or Van Scoyak want to huddle up with me tomorrow, we might be able to find language that meets, scratches my itch and theirs. And if that's the case, then that's why a collaborative process like the ones we have in Brookline are so effective in the first place.
Okay, and that's fine. When would we vote on that though? And I guess the first choice we have, since town meeting is going to be next Monday.
Are we having a meeting before that?
Well, we'll have to schedule a meeting before it.
I think we have one scheduled already.
We
Yeah.
can do that.
I think Devin put it on the calendar just in case.
Okay, so
and I'm happy to meet with virtually, of course, select board members Heller or Van Scoyak or both tomorrow, so we can finalize language and submit it to the moderator immediately and sort of give as much notice as possible to the town meeting body and the moderator.
okay, why don't we do that? And you're not a quorum, so you can meet and come up with language that will be presented to the select board on Monday.
Sounds like fun to me.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Really, can't wait.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks very much,
Representative Patolo, for bringing up this, what I consider a pretty important issue.
Thank you to all of you and have a great night.
You too.
You too. Okay, that's the end of the meeting. Let's end it. Bye, everyone.
Oh my God, it's only, it's barely 9 o'clock. That's
Right,
fantastic.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Good job, Bernard.
All right, thanks.